But now we want to shine the spotlight one more time on our departing 2014 fellows, who will each be reading briefly from some of the work they've been doing during their past year with us. We're so proud of them and know that this is only the beginning of many fabulous careers. So after the reading, we'll have a reception in the back with wine, and we hope you'll stick around to continue the celebration. And now, please welcome our first reader.
My name is Wil Weitzel. I just wanted to thank the Center for Fiction for an amazing year, and Maureen and Sarah and Chris and Matt and all these great fellows. This is a story narrated by a guy who's talking about his sister. On a day at the tail end of summer, when the wind had come up and it was cool, she and I took the canoe up the lake toward Canada. There, not so far from the border, tall cliffs rise out of the water for several hundred feet or more. As the cliffs are a long paddle, it was early afternoon by the time she'd gotten out of bed and hugging the shoreline, we'd made our way through the current. Her face at this time was unchanged from the earlier years. At least I could mark no change. She was still slender and light, and the long, silky, dark hair my father wanted her to cut had continued growing over the years. It was still growing. "I won't be long," she said, and dove into the lake, waiting for me to shift my body before she pushed off with her feet. Despite weighing relatively little, she launched herself powerfully. I've never known anyone, before or since, to dive out of a deep canoe like that one, its bolsters long and spread narrowly, and make no splash to speak of, leaving me dry. Then she was swimming for the base of the cliffs, then climbing out of the water onto the granite. She was quick and sure as a climber. When I was very young, she'd even ascended brief pitches with me on her back, and the lake to fall into. Yet this now was a high, sheared wall. At last she followed a diorite crack to an outlet among the pines, and continued grappling her way up through steep forest. Soon she stood atop a high outcropping, commanding, I can only imagine, a view of the lake for many miles south and north. "That's too high," I yelled, craning my neck. "That's way too high." For a moment she seemed to hesitate, to breathe. "You'll kill yourself." Her toes, from what I could see from below, were curled in that instant over the cusp of a narrow, slanting ledge of rock. Then she was out in the air, like an arrow, feet first and silent, thin arms together above her head. I've seen people, amateurs, jump from heights into water, their arms flailing, windmilling, the palms often flat and waving, pointed down, slowing themselves, feeling for what's beneath them. They often yell at something just after they leap that must be unexpected. But she only gained speed. There was a sharp whir near the end, just before impact, and she was tan. That was the one thing you could see in the quick instance of her flight. She was dark, dark brown. When she hit the water, there was a whip crack. I was certain, at the least, she'd been knocked unconscious by the violence of impact. Reaching the spot where she'd struck water, I dove, crashing loudly against the lake, sending the canoe rocking off. After I pushed everything out from my chest, having promised never to rise without her, and filled first the bottom, then the top of my lungs with new air, then my throat and even the cavity of my mouth as she'd taught me.
Everyone had a theory. It was a scary event, and the perpetrators, as people like to say, were still at large. There was also some concern about whether the violence might depress the summer rental market, which sounds craven, I know, but this was a rundown beach village, and most people had at least 2 or 3 sources of precarious income, couldn't afford slack in any one of them. Financially speaking, the red tide was an even bigger worry. A bad tide can wipe out a whole generation of shellfish, soft shells, hard shells, oysters. They're all at risk depending on the severity of the bloom. Clamming was still a big activity in those days. Besides the commercial operations, there were hundreds of weekend diggers, and they were all wondering about the tide. Woods Hole was tracking the algae, and the local paper published all the satellite images it could gather, but still, you had to take the whole thing on faith somewhat, because the water was toxic but not actually red. Every week the Courier would run a front-page, high-resolution image of some nondescript stretch of North Atlantic, while the heavy lifting was forced to the headlines. The red menace, blood meridian, thicker than water, that sort of thing. They were good headlines in my opinion, although probably I was biased. The paper's only salaried employee, Lenny Lopes, was a good friend. He had a whole notebook full of potential headlines. His aim, he explained, was not just to grab attention. He wanted to tap into something essential. A fear, an anxiety, a piece of the universal truth. That's the kind of pressure he was putting on himself. It was a stressful time in Lenny's life. He was closing in on 30 and was desperate to give his career a jump. This looked to him like a big opportunity. An unsolved crime and a natural disaster in one summer. He wasn't sleeping much, and if his eyes weren't bloodshot, they weren't white either. He was always cleanly shaven, though. It was something he had to do twice a day, once in the morning and once in the afternoon, and the nicks at the back of his jawline never quite healed. "What I need is a tie," he said to me one night. We were sitting outside at a table outside Esposito's. "I mean, for fuck's sake, a tie-in ought to be simple enough." He'd been going on about the break-ins and the Tide and its headlines for quite a while, and the truth is I was only half listening. Esposito's was a reliable place for people who didn't mind the distraction. There were about 15 tables on the sidewalk. Some faced the beach and others faced the town green, and the breeze that rolled down the backside of the bluffs always smelled of salt and sea plum and coppertone. There wasn't a better spot on the entire coast as far as I was concerned. "Don't look at me like that," Lenny said. "Why shouldn't there be a connection? People do strange things because of the weather all the time. Remember Hurricane Bob? Jesus. You think they tortured Clancy because of the clams? Not the goddamn clams. The apprehension. Then there's your tie-in. Christ, I wish I could write it up like that, a nice puff piece. I got too much integrity. Hand to Jesus, that's my #1 problem, fucking integrity." He really did feel that way, and probably there was some truth to it. He had a lot of bills and managed to pay them all. His mother was in a good nursing home in Sandwich. His sister had 2 kids at Bishop's Staying, and he was helping her out too. And at Esposito's, he felt obliged to give a big tip every time we came. Not just a good tip, but a big one. Obscenely big is how he described it. I don't know where the obligation came from. Old Esposito didn't seem to care one way or the other. "Listen, then," he said, "let's drive to New York." "When?" "Tonight, now." "What for?" "The hell do you mean, what for? To go?" I said I was happy right there. And that only seemed to agitate him more. Normally he had a soft, sad Portuguese face, but when he felt that someone was being obtuse or stubborn or making fun, his features got all twisted up and his eyes seemed larger than they were. "You don't see it," he said. "You really don't." I looked around. Things seemed ordinary to me. It was about 6 o'clock and the last stragglers were coming off the beach. The town green was just starting to come alive. Over on the gazebo, the old men were playing dominoes, and somebody had a radio tuned to the New Bedford station that played fado every evening at dusk and reggaeton from 8 to midnight. "See it now?" Lenny asked. "It's the post-industrial, post-maritime malaise. Nothing ever changes. Nobody even moves, for Christ's sake. They're splayed on the beach all day counting cancer cells. Who needs a goddamn reason to go anywhere?" He had it bad, I knew. I wanted to tell him that New York wasn't so different, that it was full of people who were trapped or lazy or misinformed, the same as anywhere. But the fact that I'd lived there for a while was my big achievement in Lenny's eyes. At just that moment, that summer, I had too much pride to give him the comfort he needed. "Next week," I said. "As soon as the malaise wears off, we'll go, I promise." The truth is, the trip would have been difficult for both of us. I had Maddie waiting back at the cottage, and he had a paper to get out. His integrity never would have let him go. "At least help me out on the tie-in," he said. 2 good headlines and a tie-in and we'll both sleep easier. Guaranteed. Thank you.
Hello everyone, my name is Cedrick, and I also wanted to thank the Center for Fiction and the Jerome Foundation. I will be reading once again from my novel 1001 Facts relating to Stanley McNamara's somewhat exceptional life. Though I won't be reading about the protagonist, I'll actually be reading about his parents, Joseph and Penelope, who are just moving to New York. Which I guess is ironic. My parents are actually in the audience. They came from Toronto, so if it's funny, please laugh. And again, just clap. It'll mask some somewhat otherwise mediocre rings. 1001 facts relating to Stanley McNamara's somewhat exceptional life. 41. 2 months after Penelope's parents' visit, in an attempt to stop the romance that was seeping out of their relationship with every passing day, Joseph proposed to her on top of the Empire State Building. This was well before Sleepless in Seattle, but even then, Joseph suspected that the jewel of New York City tourism would vanquish any doubts his unsuspecting girlfriend may have had. Or, at a minimum, she would have felt pressured to say yes, and then he could point out that there were hundreds of people who would be recounting a lie about that wonderfully romantic proposal they saw, unless she went through with it. Joseph was right. If it had not been for all of the people that broke into applause when they saw what was happening, Penelope was almost certain to have said no. But seeing Joseph on his knee, surrounded by all of those people, presenting a ring in a blue Tiffany's box, Penelope pushed aside her doubts and allowed herself to be the star of her own Nora Ephron movie. Yes, of course I'll marry you. 42. One of Penelope's pet peeves later in life was people who insisted on making wedding proposals in public. Nothing irked her more than seeing the big screen at a baseball stadium zoom in on a couple, just as the guy popped the question, or when someone proposed after an elaborate flash mob. What was the girl supposed to do with all of those eyes on her? Of course she was going to say yes, even if her heart said no. Penelope was certain that if anyone were to study married couples that had public wedding proposals, the divorce rates would have been astronomical. 43. The inability to use a semicolon was another item on Penelope's list of pet peeves. Lisa learned that very quickly after being assigned as Penelope's secretary. Though Lisa learned all of the rules for using a semicolon, she would never understand why that particular piece of punctuation was ever created, given that it could be replaced with the likes of a comma or a period, the kinds of things that elementary school kids could use correctly, or at least the smart ones. 44. Joseph did not have the heart to tell Penelope that the ring he had proposed with in the Tiffany's box was not from that famous store on Fifth Avenue. Instead, Joseph had braved the F train, a train only slightly more reliable than the G train and the L train, and went to Coney Island, where he had purchased the ring from a small pawn shop because, of course, Coney Island pawn shops is where people went to find high-grade diamonds. The pawn shop owner had assured Joseph that the ring was worth 10 times the amount Joseph paid, and while Joseph was tempted to have it appraised to verify the owner's bold claims, he had no desire to be told he could have bought the ring off a street corner in Chinatown. Joseph's sister Paloma had given him the blue box, taken from a friend who had many to spare. While Joseph knew that Penelope would insist that she did not care what kind of ring he got her, one of the things that he loved about her, he did not want her to be embarrassed when comparing her ring to those of the other attorneys at her firm. Even if Penelope accepted that he could not afford a flashy ring, he wanted to be able to say that he had tried. Wasn't showing up supposed to be half the battle? 45. After Penelope said yes, Joseph vowed that when he had the money, he would buy her a real ring from Tiffany's. 46. He never did. 47. When Penelope opened the blue box, she instantly knew that the ring contained within was not from Tiffany's. She hid her disappointment behind a wide smile, but she need not have worried. Joseph was too distracted by all of the people congratulating him to notice that anything was amiss. 48. One of the secretaries of Wool and Parmington had a ring polishing station that many of the women at the firm liked to use. It was a place where people gathered to ooh and ah whenever someone at the firm got engaged. While Penelope never felt comfortable flocking there to inspect a colleague's new bling, she had never felt more uncomfortable than when people gathered to look at the tiny ring on her finger. 49. Congratulations, Penelope. Why, thank you, Penelope responded. What an absolutely adorable ring. It was so thoughtful of your husband to get you something so proportional to the size of your tiny hands. I am so envious of you. Penelope knew that no one was actually envious of the ring, no matter what any of them said, and they said a lot. All they really wanted was a ring as big as a fruit-flavored ring pop. 50. Many of the male partners who walked by a gaggle of secretaries polishing and admiring each other's rings would often struggle to hide the smug look on their faces as they congratulated themselves for having purchased much bigger rings for their wives than the small ones the secretaries were busy fawning over. The rings these partners purchased for their wives may have been bigger, but generally speaking, the wives wearing them were not very happy.
Hi, I'm Su-Yee, and I'd like to thank the Center for Fiction, as well, and everyone involved. Thank you to Noreen and Chris, Matt and Sarah, and all my other fellows. I'll be reading the beginning of a new story called A Flocka Siege Murmuration. When they said 200 cases of bird flu confirmed, we kept our houses and apartments. We avoided the outdoors and all its creatures. We wore masks to avoid breathing the air that could be polluted with just about anything. We looked askance at the chickens tied with rope to the front of twill shops, to the songbirds kept in cages in the trees. We thought to ourselves, we will live as though we were dying. I was applying for med school in the States then, although living in China as an expat. I had an excuse to never leave my apartment, but when the government asked for volunteers to cull the poultry from the wet markets, I went into their offices. They looked at me, masks over their faces like my mask over mine. I said, I want to help. And they said, why? For science, I replied. And they stamped the form and said, tomorrow, 6 a.m. It was April 2013 in Shanghai, and the sky was gray from morning to night. We took a tally of the number of bird corpses we hauled out to the truck. White plastic bags of chickens and ducks, pigeons and geese. The geese were the worst, with their long necks tangling with one another, those heavy feathered bodies. The pigeons looked so small and harmless, and there were fewer of them. I, after all, had never actually seen them offered on menus around China, although I'd heard passenger pigeons still being used by enthusiasts in tall apartment buildings. There was no blood, but the smell of cooking poultry when we put them through the incinerator, a smell that made our mouths water unnervingly. To be hungry in the face of death. I saw this as practice. The same sensation one has with a human corpse, this odd feeling of hunger while dissecting reduced in formaldehyde. After all, I was interested in the processes of the body, of that tenuous boundary between being alive and not. The way certain chemicals, certain smells influence your thoughts and actions, also rational and clear. The culling of poultry was happening in all parts of the country, first these southeastern cities of Shanghai, Hangzhou, and Nanjing, then spreading west and south. The cases kept climbing, 300, then 400, then 700. People were afraid to eat chicken, even in restaurants, as though you could catch a disease from eating the flesh of these birds. There was no normal flu. It shut down the organs. It made the air feel like water so that your lungs collapsed. Your skin would sink into yourself. Your bones would sink into itself. Your bones would ache. Your heart would slowly stop beating. After the sterilization of the first market, the largest in Shanghai, I went back to my apartment that I shared with 2 other roommates, both Chinese and not expats like myself. The scent of the protection suits, the gloves, lingered on my body. I did not wash it away. The next day I went to the Department of Health again. I said, let me help. They stamped my form, again and again. No one called me from the States. My parents were long gone, and any relatives I had did not care where I was or what I was doing. My roommates kept to themselves, and instead of writing essays or teaching Chinese students the Latin roots of difficult vocabulary, I looked at photos on the internet of all the different varieties of birds, mandarin ducks and nightingales, chickadees and red-tailed hawks. I memorized their details, their Latin names and coloring, the insects and grains they ate. I printed out photographs and highlighted the names in yellow, handwrote their details in dark blue ink that stained my fingers. I went out and I placed birds into sacks and pumped in highly concentrated carbon dioxide until they died. They fought it. They beat their wings and tried to rip through the bags, but I put my hands on their bodies until they were still. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Alicia Chang. I also wanted to thank the Center for Fiction, Jerome Foundation, Chris, Matt, Sarah, Noreen. Okay. I will be reading from a novel that I've been working on this entire year I've been here. It's been really productive. And yeah, I think all I need to tell you is that Eleanor and Ellis have just come home from a party. Okay. The morning after the party is a Sunday, and it's that kind of cloudy that hurts your eyes. Ellis and I are in bed, and it is my idea to clean out the garage. Would a wistful person want to clean out a garage, I ask? Ellis gives me a laugh. He kisses me and moves close, puts a finger in me, but I'm too distracted by my idea about the garage. Outside, we uproot our things, one at a time, and lay them all on the driveway. There are various holiday decorations, tools in stained cloth bags, crates of magazines, an old air gun, fire extinguishers, shelving units, dried flowers, fake flowers. We sweep out the cobwebs, we sneeze from the dust. Ellis makes jokes about hoarders. I make jokes that we should move back to New York. Shh, Ellis says, look, they're back. He points behind me. I turn around to see that we've attracted the curiosity of 2 small raccoons. They pat around, inspect our things. They keep a furtive eye on us. One of the raccoons picks up an empty glass jar and sets it back unsteadily down. It tips and rolls the slope of the driveway, the glass grinding along the asphalt. Ellis marvels, God, look at their hands. So the raccoons are back, I think. Last year they ate our trash and scratched holes in our walls. We sprayed our property with coyote urine, which I had ordered online. But the only noticeable result was that our neighbor's dogs stopped shitting in our yard or near our house at all. The raccoons continued as normal. While we're watching them, my phone rings from inside. I'm going to let you deal with this, I say to Ellis about the raccoons. They tilt their heads at me like they're tied together by string. Inside, it's my mother, and I don't want to answer. Hi, Mom. Hi. I just get off the phone with Nerissa. That's nice. How's she doing? Good. Fat. She sent me a picture of herself and Bobby and the baby. Fat, all fat. I hear Ellis step inside the house, rummage around the kitchen, and then step out again, closing the door gingerly behind him. So how are you? How's Dad? Dad, he's fine. Medium good. He's at church now. Always going to church now. Well, I say, I actually can't talk for very long. Ellis and I are cleaning out the garage. Garage? It's kind of fun, just something to do together. Together, she repeats. She makes a sound like a pig rooting through soil. Ugh, you American children, together like a game. Everyone happy, everyone a winner. I check the clock above the oven. Well, I was born here, so I guess that makes sense. Yes, born here, but not like other American wives. You didn't notice? You're his lab assistant on the week, his garage cleaner on the weekends. Sure, born here, but you didn't make it all the way. I look through the window. Ellis is all smiles, tossing balled up pieces of bread at our raccoons. The sun is out now, and it's lit up his waning hairline. Mom sighs. You know how I know you're not happy? My youngest daughter, no picture of yourself. You never send me picture. On Monday, Ellis and I get to work at 9, and I head directly downstairs to the animal facility. As a lab tech, my job is to breed and train mice for Ellis and the postdocs. Specific genetic strains with particular neurons that are sensitive to light. One of my breeder mice has given birth 4 days ahead of schedule. At lab, I try to keep premature births a secret. Some of the postdocs can be finicky about if experiments get off to an imperfect start, and working in a lab quickly accustoms you to following the strange logic of others. Superstitious scientists, high-achieving graduate students, inbred mice, etc. The first thing we do with new pups is count them. The breeder has had 9 pups and licked them all clean. They are hairless and blind and have soft pink claws. The second thing we do is get rid of the females. Their hormonal cycles affect the data too much. There are several ways to euthanize a lab mouse, but the easiest is an overdose of carbon dioxide. I grab the females and place them in a separate, empty cage. I feed a tube through the opening at the top and let the gas seep through. They stumble over each other, feel blindly in front of them. I wait for movement in their tails, and when there is none, I pull each one neck from tail. Protocol is you kill them twice. Back upstairs at my desk, I check my email and peruse articles about humane raccoon removal. I read about the efficacy of coyote urine. One of the grad students, Samir, begins washing beakers at the sink behind me and laying them out on a rack to dry.
I switch to a different browser where I have PubMed articles already open and pretend to peruse them. Part of my job description at the lab is to provide updates on new research and press pertaining to optogenetics, report back to the team every few weeks with the latest. While Samir is rinsing and drying, I have been pretending to read articles for so long that I am now reading the articles. I am still reading the articles when my mom chats me online. When you were a baby, we loved you very much, too much, remember? The chat boxes appear all at once, fill up my screen. Yes, I type, followed by a question mark. Nothing, your mother just missing you. Wonder about you. Wonder are you safe, wonder are you happy? For a few minutes, no more boxes appear. I watch my screen like a creature waiting out a predator, and I imagine my mother doing the same. Thank you.
Hi everyone, my name is Zeeva Bukai. I want to thank the Center for Fiction for an amazing year. Thank you, Sarah, Maureen, Matt, Chris. It has been such a wonderful experience. I'm going to read to you a short excerpt from a novel that I'm working on. Basically, it takes place in Prospect Park. It's about two teenagers. This is the first time that they get together. One is Jewish-Israeli, the other one is Palestinian. The descent was quick. She lay winded at the foot of the mountain. There was a roaring in her head. Her heart thumped. She breathed in the sharp scent of earth and grass and closed her eyes, relieved she was alive. Laughing out loud, gingerly stretching her arms and legs, she wondered if it were possible to do it all again, come down that mountain like a storm. She looked up to find Faisal bending over her, his bike on the ground. Hey, he held her flip-flop in his hand. She brushed a twig out of her hair. Heat colored her face. Hey, she said. Damn, you came down the mountain fast. You're like that girl in the song. You know, she'll be coming around the mountain, only you flew down. He kicked the grass at his feet. You okay? Yeah, there's dirt all over you. I slipped, she said. Figured something like that. Break anything? Don't think so. Her cheeks felt numb. She lay unmoving. He must think I'm an idiot, she thought. Want a ride? He grabbed both her hands and tugged. Her legs felt wobbly, and it took a moment for the ground to still. She wiped her hands, then put her foot into the shoe he left on the grass and curled her toes. The sun was high, and she realized Rachel and Ari's class was about to end, and that she'd never make it back in time to pick up her brother and sister. They'd have to walk home on their own. Ma would find out. Rachel told her everything. Turn around, Faisal said. His hands were gentle as they brushed the dirt off her blouse. She winced when he reached the small of her back. He lifted her shirt in centimeters, waiting for her to protest. That's going to be some bruise. The cool air he blew on the scrape drew goosebumps on her flesh. Lucky your shirt's still in one piece. There's some blood here, I think. Hard to tell what's blood and what's dirt, he said. Thanks. Her mind slowed. Thoughts of Rachel, Ari, and Ma died away. What the hell were you doing up there, he asked, looking at the park. You always such a klutz? He was still holding on to the tails of her shirt. She tried to smile, pretending she didn't feel the insult burn through her. The more painful, because it was true. She was a clumsy girl, unlike Rachel, who was always so careful, so deliberate, Uli thought, with a prickle of resentment, as if Rachel knew people were watching her, the world a stage waiting for her to cross it. Faisal let go of Uli and climbed onto the bike. She closed her eyes and listened to the slurry of leaves, the current lap at the lake shore, the ruffle of water reeds and grasses. Each sound made her feel more alone and more frightened at what awaited her. Baba, Ma, the whole family accusing her of negligence, of selfishness. She heard the ascending voices of children at play nearby. Someone shouted, a ball dropped, a dog barked. Faisal would be gone in a minute. Well, you want to ride home? Really? She opened her eyes to see him smiling. Yeah. She settled on the crossbar and tried to keep upright and still. You can lean on me, he said. I don't mind. She made a valiant effort not to, but her body hurt, and eventually she gave in and rested against him, close enough to feel his heartbeat on her back and his breath on her hair. It took a few minutes before he found his rhythm. Her added weight threw him off. His breath was labor as he pedaled. They left the grounds and made for Fort Hamilton Parkway. Cars sped by. They climbed the hill, and when they reached the top and began to descend, it was like Faisal had turned to water. All his movements were fluid. He stood up on the pedals, her head fit into his concave belly, his ribs a tiara. They were going so fast she couldn't help laughing, and yet fear filled her mouth. It tasted like a copper penny. Faisal gave a whooping war cry and pumped his legs faster. Her eyes watered. The wind rushed against her. She wished she had the guts to stand on the crossbar the way the circus riders stood on the backs of horses. She crouched low over the handlebars to be more aerodynamic, to be the wind. Houses blurred, the trees were a whoosh of green, the Calliope Garden apartments loomed ahead, and she felt that familiar cramp in her stomach at the thought of facing her parents and a twinge of remorse that the kids had gone home without her. Want to go round again, he asked, and pointed the bike toward Ocean Parkway. He didn't stop at the lights, but skirted between cars waiting for the change. Angry drivers honked at them, but Faisal rode on. To get his attention, she turned and reached up with one arm to grab the neckline of his t-shirt. He bowed his head, and she shouted, "Let's just keep going." Looking up into his face, caught in the rays of the setting sun, she wished Faisal Mahmoudi was Jewish.
Hi, I'm Stephanie, and I'd like to thank Cedrick Mendoza-Tolentino again for this wonderful experience. It was a great year. And also congratulations to the new fellows. I'm going to be reading a little bit from a short story, and it's called The Chase. We were 47 days into our relationship when my girlfriend said it was over. Shireen was nothing special, just another shifty-eyed, short-legged, stringy-haired girl with predictable dull eyes like pennies. We met online. She wore gray cotton t-shirts a size too big and stretched out at the neck, and the same beige cotton bras, one at the strap broken and fixed with the darker red bra strap severed from somewhere else, a dead bra resurrected from our past. I reasoned she was being thrifty, ego-conscious. Sometimes in the morning, her breath smelled like old soup, residue at the bottom of the can. One can overlook a lot when they're in need of a girlfriend. Her legs often bruised, tender-colored like a bad plum, but she never remembered how she acquired these badges of her clumsy maneuver through life. Kenneth from my book club called her surly, but it was just the poor quality of her voice. Like expecting a tape recording of an opera to sound like the real thing. And who was Kenneth anyway? I only saw him every first Tuesday of the month, if I finished my book in time, which was never. Now Shireen was gone, and I had to get her back. I blamed my body. Inspecting my physique in the full-length mirror that I hid in my closet, I assessed the cumulative damage. I was starting to develop that soft, rotund body of men that have let age devour them. The unfortunate gut looming perilously over my penis. A precipice on the brink of collapse, threatening to squash my manhood into oblivion. My meaty chest could no longer be confused with lumps of muscle mass or leftover holiday fat. It was May, after all. What holiday could I possibly be recovering from? It was becoming metamorphosing into distinct memories. But I was only 27, too young to start a slow descent to the grave. To save myself the embarrassment of public scrutiny at the local gym, I needed an alternative solution. What I needed wasn't a personal trainer, but a symbiotic relationship. My need to exercise fueled by the desire of another person. So, I decided to take up running. I associated the art of running with masochism or undercover insanity, for how else could you explain the inane desire to run without a legitimate life-threatening reason? Proud men and women running marathons of various charitable natures, while the rest of us unfit creatures are faced with a slew of mass emails to support the colleague working down the hall who we've never spoken to, but now would be assholes if we didn't donate our hard-earned lunch money to his cause. Running is a trend, a religion, a lifestyle. I was suspicious of this, and I wanted no part. But what I wanted was my adrenaline pumping in my fucking ears. I wanted to smell sweat, and I wanted panic, and I wanted to hear footsteps behind me. so I decided to pay someone to chase me. It wasn't hard to get the first round of interviews. I didn't know what to expect. I had never done this before, so I didn't know how much to offer as payment, or whether people would run for free, or better yet, if they would pay me to participate. I chose 18, the age I lost my virginity, and to pay by the hour. I couldn't run more than an hour at a time anyway, and $18 was manageable. We could set up a weekly schedule or play it by ear. I wasn't sure what kind of person I was looking for, and what a compatible writing style might be, but figured I would get a better idea once I interviewed people and saw the talent that was out there. So I wrote on a piece of paper, $18 an hour at a time, or possibly more. I am 5'7", medium build with a little extra, short hair, brown eyes, flexible ears, shoe size 10. Environment and schedule negotiable. Partner must be healthy but not too healthy, and over 18 but under 45. I am 27. No smokers, no excessive sweaters, and no complainers. I need to be chased, and I hope to find someone who would like to chase me, and that we could work well together. My name is Craig. I added my email and phone number in a P.O. box in a Princess Lab, and posted flyers all around the neighborhood, and supermarket billboards and poles adjacent to signs of missing canines and English tutors for immigrants with detachable contact information. And oh, how people responded. They sent me hopeful pictures of themselves kayaking with friends, of a graduation years ago, posed with their pets or grandsons, food consumed, holiday cruise snapshots, all of it. I got home addresses, cell phone numbers, locker combinations, credit card numbers, star signs, crosses and prayer beads, handmade stickers, school pamphlets urging donations, clumps of hair from all parts of their bodies, a potpourri, soccer jersey, penis enlargement advertisements with a scribbled personal note underneath, magnets with my initials, sexual favors involving squirrels and genital piercings and cotton candy, yes, all together, favorite songs along with performances of said song in various formats, some too archaic for retrieval, and other extraneous information that failed to display their aptitude as a chaser. Loneliness flooded my inbox mercilessly. Thank you.
Hi everyone, I'm Lisa Armstrong, and like everybody else, would like to thank the Center for Fiction for an amazing year, and congratulations to the new fellows. I'm going to read sections from something that I just started working on. He held a coin in his hand, an American quarter a woman had given him the month before, because she had assumed he was a beggar. He had seen it done in the movies. You choose heads or tails, and you throw the coin in the air, watching as it spins and then lands, making the decision for you. He thought it was odd that the side of the coin with a bird on it was called tails. And so instead, he said to himself over and over, heads or birds, heads or birds. Finally, he settled on birds, because he liked birds. And he thought that if indeed the coin did land with the side of the bird face up, it would be an omen. It would be a sign that Allah was in accord with his decision and would grant him the wings to fly. I will tell you a little about my village, the place I am originally from. It is in the dip between two forested hills, a spot that is perfect, like the small flat space where the breasts of a woman meet. It is said that our ancestors settled there because the land is fertile, so that if you drop a kernel of maize, it will sprout in an instant and bear so much maize that the cobs become almost a burden, bending the slender stalk. The land is also protected, as the hills and the forest were a deterrent for the others who thought to take our land. Some did try, but the forest was filled with venomous snakes, and the last group of men who tried to sneak down to the valley in the night to attack by surprise were found dead in the morning. The mambas had dropped from the trees and killed them. Until my grandfather's generation, men would go to the forest to leave offerings for the snakes. But we do not do that anymore. In fact, now if we see a snake in the village, we will kill it, because snakes have bitten children and killed our goats. My grandfather says it is because we young people have not kept up the tradition of feeding the snakes, so the snakes have turned against us. I try to tell him no. The story of the mambas protecting the village is just fiction, but he puts up his hand to silence me. You think your education makes you better than anyone else, but it does not, he says. It makes no sense to put things in your head if at the same time you're emptying your heart. I am the most well-educated person in my village. Before me, there were 4 who finished secondary school, but I went even further, earning a certificate in English from the English Language Institute in Dakar. My father has my certificate hanging in his living room, mostly so that he can boast to friends. My mother is proud, but she is also afraid. She is afraid that I will leave, and I am her first, her favorite. She lost 3 children in a row after having me. Each slipped out of her body as she slept. She once told me this when I was 5, and she thought perhaps I would not understand what she was saying. But I have always remembered, because her eyes were red, and her face was so heavy with sadness, and I was afraid she would never be beautiful again. And so, because she feared that she would never bear any more children, she loved me fiercely, and invested all her love and dreams in me, so that I got more than any other children in the village, because they all had brothers and sisters they had to share their mother's dreams and love with. Perhaps this is why I went so much further than anyone else in my village, far across the sea, because I had such an abundance of love and faith to fuel me. I have never been so close to another person, felt my body press against theirs so that my sweat became their sweat. Even when you are making love, there is a breath, a pause, a moment when the bodies separate to take in air. And in this boat, there was no space between my body and that of the people to my left, to my right, to my back, to my front. I could feel the boat groan beneath my feet. I was worried because the boat was weary before she had even begun her voyage. How then would she make it to Spain with so many Africans upon her back? The men in charge kept pushing more and more people on board so that there was less and less space, less and less air, no room to move, to even breathe. My heart was pounding. It was loud. I could hear it in my ears, and I wondered if the people around me could hear it too. I thought perhaps it would make sense to leave this boat, because something inside me told me that this was not the right choice. I should have stayed in my village. But there was no escape, and the fact that I was trapped made my mind and heart race even faster. The man pressed to my right was staring at me, chewing on a twig and cleaning his teeth with the frayed edges. "You have family already there?" he asked in Wolof. "Kind of," I said. "What do you mean, kind of? Either someone is your relative, or they are not." I put my face in my hands. I considered Lisbeth family, because it was my intention to marry her, but I could not tell this man I was crossing the sea for love. You should cross to find work, to be reunited with family, but for a girl, this was too expensive and dangerous a risk to take. "There are girls at home in Senegal," he would tell me. "What does this girl have? Does she not have just the same parts that all other girls have?" This is why I had not had the courage to tell anyone in the village where I was going and why. I knew that once I made it safely to Europe, once I had a job and could send money back home, everyone would understand. People would envy me even. "Look at Louis," they'd say. "Not only is he educated, but he has a white wife and a fine job in France." But they would not have that wisdom before, to see that my plan was a smart, sound one. If I told them now that I was planning to cross the sea because of love, these same people would call me a fool. "What is love?" my grandfather would ask. "In my time, people did not go searching for this thing you call love because we had sense. What is love? Can you plant it so it will grow into food for your family? Will love make your wife bear children? If no, then what is its use?" I settled onto the floor of the boat, pushing my legs out so that I could preserve as much space for myself. From my pocket, I pulled out a photo of Lisbeth. It is one she sent me in a letter when she returned to France. "To Louis, love Lisbeth," it said on the back. I stuffed it back in my pocket before anyone else could see. All I needed was a glimpse of her face to quiet me. My heart slowed. My mind settled into prayer, asking that we would make this trip safely, that the boat would reach its destination without being stopped by an angry sea, or the police, I had been told, would sometimes turn away ships like ours, full of Africans. Thank you.